It's Friday, which means it's time for another exciting episode of Ask Us Anything. And this week, boy, do we have a lot of Dune Part 2 questions for you. Thank you very much for that, actually, because it's been the only thing we've been talking about, because we've had a lot of thoughts. Let's kick things off with at Daphne M88, who asks, while Dune Part 2 was epic, many fans of the book were upset that things were changed. These changes are also pretty significant. So what is your take on that, and how significantly different will Dune Messiah be with these changes?
Should I go and leave the room? Do I go make coffee and then I'll come back in about 20 minutes?
I mean, you can go make a coffee lah.
Yeah, I'll be back in about 20 minutes.
I think we've spoken about this before with regards to what you expect from an adaptation. And I'll say it again. I think books can do things that only books can do. I think cinema can do things that only cinema can do. As a fan myself, I've come into this with a certain expectation. And just like Avatar: The Last Airbender, just like any adaptation, I'm expecting the director and the writer of the film to capture a mood and a tone and the general gist of the storyline. I don't want him to change the character of Paul Atreides completely. Then that would be an abomination, because go ahead and write your own character if that's the case. What I think Denis done is kept to the spirit of the novel. He has changed very little with regards to who these characters are. What he has changed, however, is left out plot points. And for me, plot points aren't as important as character points. Because I think you can get to the same end with regards to plot points. I think plot points are irrelevant. It doesn't matter that in the book, there is a 2-year period after the raid on the Atreides, and that Paul and Chani have a child named Leto, which Baron Harkonnen kills. I mean, all of that for me doesn't affect the flow of the story in this case. And even though Denis Villeneuve has changed all of that, I think the general gist of it is still there. And so those significant changes don't matter to me as much, because if I loved it so much, I'll just go reread the book again, which I've done multiple times. But as far as a film adaptation goes, it has captured the spirit and the tone of what is going on. Now, in Dune Part 2 and Dune Part 1, there is a shift in focus, and I think a smarter one, with regards to the Bene Gesserit, Chani, Princess Irulan. I think all of their roles are very interesting in telling the story of Paul Atreides. So even if you look at the way Dune Part 2 ends, there is a shift in POV. So we've seen the story from Paul's point of view, but as soon as he ascends to that higher status of Messiah, I think the story becomes boring if we continue to see it from his point of view. And so for me, the shift to Chani and Irulan is very, very smart, because then we get to see what his impact is on the universe from the POV of you and me, right? Because they are the average people. I mean, sure, she's a princess, but he is the motherfucking Messiah.
Yeah.
So I don't have a problem with the changes. I think the book still exists, so if I wanted that version, I could go and read it. This isn't a problem for me, and I would be interested to see where Dune Messiah goes from there. Now, Dune Messiah is a very small book. It's like a Hobbit-sized book. It is essentially a really extended epilogue for Dune.
Right.
So Frank Herbert wrote 6 original Dune novels. The first 2 kind of tell the story of Paul. Then it spans off into Alia, who is his sister, other characters, goes off the rails a little bit in books 4, 5, and 6. And then Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson kind of have another 20 Dune books, I think, because apparently Brian Herbert found lost notes of his father's. I have no idea if that is true. And I have no idea if I'm misremembering this, but I read those original spin-offs when I was much younger and thought they were shit. I think I might want to revisit them. I don't know if I was just young and assigning a Yoko Ono imprint on Brian Herbert. Like, I don't know if I was just being a hater.
Question. I'm just going to double down on Daphne M88's question here. With what we've seen in Denis Villeneuve's Dunes Part 1 and 2, Does that change Dune Messiah the book, or can Denis just essentially make Dune Messiah the book without having to fiddle around with too many of the threads?
It doesn't change the overarching plot of the book, but there are characters that he has left out who played a
Okay.
significant part in the first book. So think Tom Bombadil in The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Actually, The Lord of the Rings is a very good example. There's a lot of stuff that Peter Jackson left out. He should have employed that same kind of discipline for The Hobbit, but he did not.
Let's not talk about The Hobbit.
Instead, he decided, I'm going to add shit and write in new characters.
Let's not talk about The Hobbit.
Because Tolkien, you know what? He didn't have a love story, Bahir.
I thought we agreed to never mention The Hobbit. I thought that was in my contract and that we will not discuss The Hobbit. And let's move on.
Ever.
Yeah. Ever.
I think what Villeneuve has done is actually streamlined the first book. And we talked about it in our review and how he's created the good bits version. And that's what we have with Dune. I think any adaptation of a novel which is that complex can only be put on screen in this way. And I'm a huge fan of what he's done. I think it is always an act of translation when you are taking something from one medium and putting it on another. Whether it's a comic book to a novel, or a novel to a TV show, or a movie, or even a book from Japanese to English. The translator doesn't sit there and go, okay, this is a word for word translation of what is going on in this Murakami novel, and that would be awful.
I always put down adaptations of anything from one medium to another as more of a transliteration as opposed to a translation.
Correct.
Because the medium changes, right? In a book, you've got, I don't know how many words a page, whereas you need 60 seconds of time, and that does not necessarily translate from paragraph or sentence. Plus, the sentence, a longing look, is 3 words, but may require 60 seconds, 45 seconds, 30 seconds of airtime. And I think that difference is what a good director can bring to an adaptation.
In a book, you can have an entire chapter. You can have 20 pages dedicated to the inner thoughts of a character as to what is going on in his head. I think a good director and a good screenplay can do that in 60 seconds. And I think that's what makes for a fantastic adaptation. So, as a big fan of Dune, I am not offended or upset about this. I think it's a different medium, and I'm really, really excited to see where Villeneuve takes Dune Messiah.
Another Dune question at Feisty Flow. Let's be honest, how many cuts did Dune Part 2 go through by LPF? I counted at least 2. It's PG-13 lah. That final sentence is important here, Feisty Flow, in that a distributor / studio, depending on the markets, can decide on what kind of rating to give it, which means more or less people go and watch it. The cuts done for Dune 2 were quite good. Uma will be able to tell you of a scene that was completely reshot for, let's say, markets who have sensitivities. But I think the PG-13 thing, it is PG-13, and yes, 13-year-olds have probably seen a lot more than they should. But I think as a cinema, as a distributor, they have to be more conscious financially with regards to what they do or do not keep in and what rating a film gets.
So I'm assuming the cut that you noticed was the one in which Paul and Chani are in bed, essentially, and having a conversation. And of course, it's not really a cut. It's a pan and scan, right? They zoom in really close. And the other one, which is, I think, already in the news because Austin Butler was talking about the scene in which Fade Rotha kisses Baron Harkonnen. And Austin Butler was talking about how he improvised that scene. I think it was a 2-second scene or a 3-second scene. It was pretty insignificant and doesn't affect the story in any way. But that wasn't actually cut by our LPF. So what now happens in a lot of cases is that Warner Brothers or Sony or Disney will have different versions of the film. And so given the sensitivities of certain countries, they will send them that version. And so we got the version without that scene. And it wasn't actually LPF. It was the studio going, hey, we want to avoid any kind of sensitive issues. So we're sending the Middle East version to you. And actually, that's what Malaysia gets. Malaysia gets the Middle East version.
Yeah. And look, I mean, for me, that's like, I appreciate that. I appreciate when a production takes into account sensitivities because I'd much rather they spend an extra minute reshooting a scene instead of getting some happy-go-lucky intern somewhere to cut it out or trim it down. I feel like this is a more accurate to the director's vision kind of version.
I'm happier when they recut a scene as opposed to leaving it to the discretion of some bureaucrat at the LPF.
Yep, true.
So we saw it in Oppenheimer. The nude scene in Oppenheimer was a Nolan approved digital edit. And so Florence Pugh was wearing that weird black dress. Earlier in the movie Spartacus, the remake, there was a version without Jesus that was sent out to the Middle East and Southeast Asia because we are not allowed to depict any prophet on screen.
Yeah.
Mad Max Fury Road, this was interesting. They actually shot two versions. They had a version where the women were bare-chested that was shown in America, and in the version we got, so you didn't have to cut anything, the women had armor on or their chests were covered. So it was all very smart in the way they've done that, and that way they avoid any kind of complications, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, essentially one scene was pan and scanned, and the other scene was actually just removed at source.
Yeah.
At Rabbit Hop asks, since Dune Part 2 is out, what are your favorite Denis Villeneuve movies? Will there be another marathon when Messiah comes out? Yes, even when Messiah comes out, you can guarantee that we are going to do a 3-movie marathon. We will make that shit happen. As for the first part of your question, it's a very difficult one because if you go back and you look at Denis Villeneuve's film career, I don't believe he has made a bad movie. I have enjoyed every one of his films. I can't make a list. I can probably tell you which one I liked the most, but they're also so different, right?
Yes.
Prisoners, Sicario, Blade Runner, Dune, Arrival, so different.
For me, it's a toss-up between Sicario and Arrival. I feel like those two movies are the movies I find the easiest to rewatch. Although, I'll be honest, Sicario is slightly hampered by the fact that there are pretty not so good sequels out there as well.
You said sequels. Is there more than one?
Isn't there? Wait,
I thought that was just Day of the Soldado. I thought that was just Sicario 2.
Well, a third film's in development.
Fuck off.
So anyway, Denis Villeneuve's Sicario is slightly hampered in my readings because of the sequel and potential sequel. But I think Arrival is perfect in tone. Arrival is such a Denis Villeneuve movie while also probably feeling like the least Denis Villeneuve movie. It feels like he got out of the way of the writing and the story that he was telling.
Hey man, Arrival is a better Interstellar. I'm telling you right now.
Next question. I agree. I think Arrival is, of the most recent sci-fi films, feel like the best hard sci-fi film. I think Interstellar wants to pretend to be a hard sci-fi film, but it's actually just a family drama in space.
Yeah.
At Zeeming94 asks, do you have any plans to watch Dune Part 2 in IMAX 1570 in Melbourne?
Goggler is now seeking sponsorship for flights to Melbourne.
we are open to proposals to send 2 representatives to go watch Dune Part 2 in IMAX 1570. I mean, for me, the only interesting bit about that is the fact that Melbourne has got one of only 12 copies of that film in 1570 format.
It'll be the closest we could ever get to watching that film. I guess the vast majority of those prints are going to be in the US and the UK.
Yes, correct. You know what? Unlike Oppenheimer, it's not quite the same because Oppenheimer was shot in 1570.
Yes,
this was shot with IMAX cameras, but shot digitally. So I'm not saying that it's going to be any less fantastic or impressive, but I feel like Denis Villeneuve has given us permission to just watch it in IMAX digital and be done with it.
Yes, Nolan never gave us that permission. Nolan was like, no,
did not give us that
shot
permission.
it in film. You have to watch it in film. Otherwise, you are getting a lesser experience.
Yeah, so that's that. Yeah.
At Matlow Films asks, since experiencing Dunes Part 1 and 2 on IMAX, I couldn't help but wonder what the possibilities are for Malaysian cinema in the IMAX format. Would we ever have a local story that deserves to be seen on that scale? If so, what would you guys like to see? First of all, at Matlow Films, I think we're a long way off with regards to having this conversation because we haven't even gotten the basics right. Of the 40 or so films that come out every year in Malaysia, maybe 2 of them, 3. Last year we had a good run, but on the whole, maybe 2 or 3 are excellent. I don't believe it's actually a question of scale of story that needs to be shown on IMAX. I think it's just how a director chooses to shoot the movie and tell that story. If you look at the way Nolan did Oppenheimer, he doesn't use IMAX cameras in the same way that most people do. It's not about beautiful vistas and amazing landscapes. He uses this massive IMAX camera to get close ups on people. So
Yeah.
you see acting and performance in a way that you've never seen before. It's not a question of a story, but it's a question of the filmmaker with the skill and the ability to use that format in an interesting way. As for me, I still want to see a great Hang Tuah movie in Malaysian cinemas. And so if someone writes a great story and shoots a great Hang Tuah movie, I will watch the shit out of that on IMAX, my friend.
I mean, I think there are two sort of things to note here. Last year's Malbat was released on IMAX.
It was the first Malaysian movie to be released on IMAX.
So it's not like it hasn't been done, it is there.
Important to note, it wasn't shot on IMAX. It was converted to IMAX.
I also wanted to sort of go back to what you were talking about earlier with regards to the way Nolan uses IMAX cameras. The way that a lay person would think about shooting with IMAX was how he used the IMAX format when he shot The Dark Knight. I have the Blu-ray edition of The Dark Knight, and as much as I enjoyed that film, I found it really distracting when the ratio changes on my TV every time he switches over to an IMAX camera. And I feel like for that one, it really was, oh, look at me do this cool thing in IMAX camera. I'm glad he got that out of his system. An interesting way to use the IMAX format is more important than whether or not a film can be converted to IMAX.
But Malaysian cinema has a ways to go lah.
Before we can even ask those questions.
Also, one more thing which we didn't talk about. This is a very expensive process. So a lot of the time, Malaysian productions can't even afford it. I mean, to be able to use IMAX cameras exclusively on your shoot, to truly shoot it in IMAX. And I'm not even talking about using 1570 film, even the digital ones. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And if you speak to Malaysian filmmakers, the range of equipment we have here in the country that they can use is already so limited, let alone how much it's going to cost to hire a whole bunch of IMAX cameras lah.
And the technicians and specialists that come with those IMAX cameras.
Oh yeah, because it's not like you and I can pick one up and just go, all right, let's shoot out dinner.
Yeah. What's a focus like? No. At Jazzy Nas asks, if you could only afford one or maybe two streaming platforms, which would you recommend?
We have plenty of thoughts about this. But I have to say, before we get into it, I think you and I have a very different philosophy than most people with regards to this sort of thing.
The only way to answer this question is to ask another question. What does your family makeup look like?
Correct.
Yeah, because I think with that question, you can then answer that question more accurately for that person who's asking.
I feel like you need a chart.
It's a flow chart.
It's a flow chart that you have to go yes or no, and build your way up to it.
Yeah.
But that said, our philosophy with regards to these sorts of things is that more isn't necessarily better. Now, we grew up with cable TV and we had 150 channels at our disposal, but how much of that were we actually watching?
Yeah.
How many times have we sat on our couch in front of a television and just scrolled through our cable box for like 30 minutes before deciding that we're just going to go to sleep anyway? Like, lots of times, right? Yeah. And so my philosophy about these sorts of things is quality over quantity. And so if you ask me in my current state, my top two picks would be Apple TV Plus and either Prime Video or HBO. The reason being, if you are an average person who doesn't watch as many shows as we are for work, when you sit down to watch something, you want it to be of quality. And I think with the shows on Prime, Apple TV Plus, or HBO, some of them may not be catered to you, but I feel that they are of the highest quality. Like, it's very rare that we shit on a show on those platforms because I think the human beings making them have curated them in a very good way.
So I think a way to sort of qualify that would be if you're one of those people that just want to watch good things without ever having the instinctual reaction to watch something you've already seen 7-10 years ago, I think then, Apple TV Plus, HBO is the top two. However, if you're in a household with families, you have children, or you live in a household with your parents, I feel like you can't get away from Netflix. Netflix provides enough options for all age ranges and interests and scale, that if you come home from work at 9 o'clock, and to be fair, most Malaysians come home from work at about 7:38 anyway, you only want something quick, easy to watch. You can pull up How I Met Your Mother, you can pull up something like The Big Bang Theory. It's easier, right? I think if you have a family, then your option changes to Netflix and probably Disney Plus.
I was just going to say, I think Disney Plus comes into that as well because you've got the whole Disney back catalog. You've also got Nat Geo. So you've got the educational stuff there as well. If you are a Star Wars, Marvel fan, then there is no escaping Disney Plus. It's interesting because the age of streaming has actually made things a lot more complex, so much so that we're reaching a tipping point, right? If you look at the trade papers, there are lots of articles about what's going to happen to all of these streaming services. Are they going to shut down? Are they going to merge? Are cable networks going to be like, hey, come join us? We'll create package plans so you can pick and choose which streaming service you want to have. Like whatever was old is new again.
Which is essentially what Astro is doing here, right? They're throwing in these bundles of HBO, and if you want Netflix, you can get it through them. If you want Disney Plus, you can get it through them.
Over the next few years, it's going to be an interesting turning point in how we subscribe to television. I think we've reached that stage now where there is so much good content that's spread out across so many platforms that it's actually given rise to piracy again, because people are like, oh, well, why am I paying 500-600 ringgit a month if I want to subscribe to everything just to watch like one show here and there?
Yeah.
I will just pick and choose the two services I want to subscribe to and then download the other shows or buy one of those Android boxes, right?
Yeah.
And so in fighting that piracy, sure, governments have to crack down and do something about it. But also, I think it's going to boil down to how the streaming services and the providers themselves decide how they want to deliver that content to you.
Yeah.
At Ellen Tan SL asks, are you guys looking forward to Three Body Problem coming out on Netflix this month? Have you read the books? And do you think it can be adapted well since it has complex ideas and theories? So we're not allowed to talk about it. Both Bahir and I have seen it, but it's under embargo. So we're only allowed to talk about it once the embargo lifts. However, I've read the books. I'm a big fan of the books. You haven't, right, Bahir?
I have not read the books.
Well, I'll tell you why I was a big fan of the books. It's very rare that we get science fiction out of China. And for me, when I read the books, it was a really, really interesting experience because we got to see classic science fiction from the point of view of a Chinese narrative. And so it starts with the Cultural Revolution and we see how that affects academics and then how that plays into this idea of alien visitors. And it's something rare. It was something that was told by a Chinese person from a Chinese POV, which made for very interesting science fiction. Every country has their own worldview. And a lot of the sci-fi that we see comes from the West. And it tends to be a little similar because it comes from that worldview. So I'm excited about this adaptation, which isn't to say there wasn't already an adaptation. China themselves made an adaptation. And I can't remember. It's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, that was a lot.
And I want to say you can watch it for free on Iqiyi, the Chinese platform.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I don't think you have to pay. You can just register and you can watch the episodes for free.
Yeah.
We will definitely review Three Body Problem when we are allowed to. But for the most part, yes, we're looking forward to it.
At Asia Popcorn Mai asks, this might be random, but what do you think about District 9?
Neil Blomkamp's best movie.
Oh, interesting.
Did you watch that in the cinema?
I'm pretty sure I did.
I haven't seen it since it came out in the cinema.
Same.
But I remember it blowing me away.
I found that I had a different reaction from you. I remember thinking at the time that it was too much xenophobia. It felt like too much of social segregation. It just felt like it was too much. The violence and the racial inequality against the aliens, it just felt like too much. I'm not downplaying the fact that that is what people in Johannesburg probably went through during apartheid, but the science fiction element of it felt diminished by all these other experiences that it sort of really overwhelmed me. In a bad way, yeah.
No, I can see that. I can see how the social commentary can get in the way of the sci-fi stuff. I had a different experience, I think, because I had just been to South Africa.
Right.
So one of my friends was getting married and he's South African. And so I had experienced and seen a lot of stuff that you'd only read about. And that was interesting to me. Like, apartheid was over,
Yeah.
but the remnants of it could still be seen and felt. And so I think I took away something different from that movie, but I really enjoyed it. I should watch it again. It's been a long time.
It's been a long time. It was released in 2009.
At Mars Magud asks, if you had the opportunity to cast or recast a movie, which movie would you choose? I don't have an answer to this. It's very difficult. I spent a lot of time thinking about it.
I did too, yeah. I feel like this is a conversation I've already had with my wife, but I, for the life of me, can't think of one right now.
So I got stuck on the recast bit because I don't know if there was anything I would do that hasn't already been done. So for me, I think Edward Norton was a terrible Hulk.
Yeah.
And even as I was watching that movie, I was like, why is he in this? Can we have someone else?
Right.
And then they put in Mark Ruffalo, and I'm like, yep, it's genius. It works. It's great. With the recast bit, I'm a bit stuck. As for casting a movie, I think we do it all the time, right? Whenever someone announces that they're going to make something or adapt something, we get these ideas in our head based on the actors we've seen. My problem with that is a lot of the time we don't see or know what a person is capable of. And I've been proven wrong many, 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 many times. And I think that's what I'm usually so excited about when someone makes a casting that is completely out of left field. The most prominent example I can think of, at least from my lifetime, is Michael Keaton as Batman. It was a hellscape before there was the internet. I remember news stories where people were interviewing geeks in comic stores and people were pissed off and they were like, who is this guy? He is a comedian. He is not Bruce Wayne. He just does ha-ha slapstick comedies. This is going to be awful. And then Michael Keaton fucking nails it.
I think it's worth noting what Michael Keaton was doing at that time because, like you said, he wasn't considered a dramatic actor as he is now, right? I mean, prior to Batman, he was doing pretty straight up comedy.
He was Mr. Mom.
He was Mr. Mom. He was Beetlejuice. It's a very radical casting by Tim Burton to bring in Michael Keaton to play this stoic Bruce Wayne. And I think that's important because from that point on, he's better remembered for his dramatic roles post Batman. And I feel like that's important to note. I've got a few. Jared Leto's Joker, which was terrible. I also didn't think Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor worked.
You mean Mark Zuckerberg as Lex Luthor?
And I've got a new one. I'm unsure about Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner in Superman.
Oh, interesting.
Only because I feel like the ages don't work.
Right. Okay.
For me, it's just that.
It depends how Gunn has structured his DCU story, lah.
I'm not one to pull the pitchforks and light bonfires against James Gunn, but I'm willing to wait and see. I'm just unsure about Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner.
For me, the only reason that works perfectly is because Nathan Fillion does good asshole.
I don't think it's a problem with the actual actor playing the role. I feel like I'm not sure how that character with that actor is being in this movie where a lot of the cast members feel a lot younger. Chest asks, how do you make it through movies that are bad, has a slow build-up, or is difficult to watch, i.e. disturbing? Are there different ways of coping for each? If I'm not watching it for work, generally I stop.
I was just going to say, a lot of the time, just go with what you feel.
Yeah.
If something is bothering you from the outset, skip it. It's not worth it, right? I used to do this thing. I used to be a book critic and I used to review a lot of books. And back then, I felt the need to finish every book I started. I was young and stupid. Now, even when I'm reading for pleasure, if I've gotten through 50 pages and it's not working for me, I'm like, you know what? Life's too short.
Yeah.
Fuck it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to suffer through a bad book.
And I think it also worth noting that your mood at the time may be wrong as well. You may be sitting down to watch a heavy drama when you've just had a bad day at work and it's not working for you at that particular moment. You can always come back to it.
And also, it's something we've spoken about before. Coming back to movies at different stages of your life will have a different appreciation for them. Blade Runner is a very good example. As a kid, I remember watching Blade Runner and I just didn't get it. And I swear to God, I spent most of my time pretending it was a good movie. Because I didn't understand it and everyone told me it was one of the greatest movies ever made, I sat there watching it going, yeah. This is a great movie. It's got to be a great movie. I'm the stupid one for not getting it, right? And honestly, only when I rewatched it when I was in my 20s did I appreciate what Ridley Scott had done. Before that point, I was so used to a different kind of science fiction. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
And you can take away from this what you like. But for us, when we are having to watch a bad slash boring slash cliched slash disturbing film for work, the question we always ask ourselves is, what is the director trying to do? What is the point of this movie? And that normally keeps us through the runtime of the film.
But for the most part, movies and TV shows are supposed to be an escape for you. They're supposed to be entertaining. You want to enjoy them. And I don't mean just watch comedies. I mean, enjoyment can be derived from different things. You can watch a serious drama, you can watch a comedy, you can watch a sci-fi epic, whatever floats your boat. And if you're not in it for work, if you're not in it for analysis, if you're not writing a review, why put yourself through those sorts of things? It doesn't matter if someone says it's great. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. Just change the channel, put on another DVD, heck, walk out of the cinema. It's not worth it.
Don't pull out your phone because you just want the air conditioning, because, that'll annoy everybody else. But yeah, just leave, go to sleep, whatever.
At Zen Yao Yin asks, any chance of another IMAX movie marathon when Furiosa comes out? Also, top 5 disappointing endings not named Game of Thrones or Star Wars.
I just want to say for that first one, if there's an interest, if there's a want for this, write into us. Let us know. So we can then take that to a distributor and say, look, we've had people clamoring for this. Let us know. That will help.
I mean, to answer your question, yes, of course we want to do these things because we're huge fans of Mad Max. Man, I would love to see the black and white Mad Max on IMAX.
You dare, you bastard. You don't. Oh, you know what? Like, now I'm being the bastard. Watch the colored Mad Max. Go watch Furiosa. And then the black and white one. Oh. I mean, I think it'd just be the two of us left in the cinema.
Bahir is right. If you do want to see this, write into us and then we can show it to Warner Brothers who are distributing Furiosa and we can say, listen, people want another marathon, man. Let's make it happen. We spoke about this at our Dune marathon. It's a cost issue, right? It costs a lot of money to bring in these DCPs and these prints. And a lot of the time, given our terrible exchange rate, it makes things prohibitively expensive. And so cinemas too are not really keen on hosting these kinds of events. Then again, as our Spider-Verse marathon and Dune marathon has shown them, you guys deliver, buy tickets, and come out in full force. So if you continue to do that, we can continue to host these marathons. As for the second part of your question, top 5 disappointing endings not named Game of Thrones or Star Wars, I have a list, Bahir. Lost, which I think is perennial. Yep. Everyone has a problem with that ending. I really hated the ending of Battlestar Galactica.
I will have to politely disagree with you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Really? Fuck you.
Yeah.
You cannot be serious, dude.
I am.
The whole full circle bullshit with the flash forward to New York, I couldn't. I was like, what is this?
I didn't think that was the best ending, but I thought that was a choice and I was there for it. I was God. I'm cool.
Okay, you know what? That is like me and How I Met Your Mother. I love that ending. I know people hated that ending.
I liked where it ended up. I didn't like the speed it was done in.
Yeah, it was very rushed.
That was my issue. I didn't mind where it ended up. And only because subsequently the creators have come out and said that when they were shooting the scenes with the two children, they had shot that in season 1. So they always knew where they were going to go. And I was okay with that. I liked where that series ended for the characters. I just didn't like how quickly it got there.
We should have had at least a whole season with the mother, right?
We should have had a whole season with the mother. In some ways, as the audience member, I was not given the chance to fall in love with her and feel the heartbreak of her passing.
Speaking of speed, Quantum Leap. I don't know if you've seen the last episode of the Scott Bakula series, but
I know what
for
happens.
Me, it is an absolute insult. Like the last episode is very cool because he leaps into a bar and it's kind of like a philosophical episode as to what he's been doing. And in that bar, there are other leapers. And it kind of builds out this world very interestingly. But of course, I think the show was prematurely ended. And my problem with the ending was that the network had so little respect for the show that even the title card at the end that says Dr. Sam Beckett never made it home, they spell Beckett wrong.
Right.
They spell the name of their lead character in their own show wrong. I'm like, what the fuck, NBC?
Oh, that sucks. Yeah. Okay, I give you that. Yeah.
I also didn't like the ending for Gilmore Girls, and I thought the Netflix reboot didn't really help, but that was a case of the creators leaving the series with the original run. And so the ending wasn't where they wanted it to be. They got the creators back, the original writers and creators back for the Netflix show. But by that point, that original envisioned ending felt a little out of date for me. So I didn't like the ending to Gilmore Girls.
I thought the ending for Dexter was terrible. That final 2 episodes, I think it was.
Yeah. I'm sorry, lah, but
We're not going to spoil it, but like what she said to him, I'm not sure if that spurred the killing, but like what she says to him and then him killing her just felt, what the fuck are you doing? Where the fuck are you going? Even then, even after that, they have him drive off into a storm only to then cop out again.
yeah, you think he's dead, but nope. He's a lumberjack.
I watched the recent season, the additional season of Dexter.
I didn't bother, dude.
It wasn't bad.
Okay.
For me, it felt out of place because why are we doing this now? There's no reason for this now. You've broken our hearts already. Why are you coming back to this? While we're on the topic, and I know we're already running a little long, but what is your take on the Sopranos ending?
I love the Sopranos ending.
But what is your take on it? What happens, you think, after the screen goes to black?
Okay.
Can you just set it up for us? Like, spoil the series for everybody.
So the Sopranos ending is quite interesting. And the reason I like it is because it kind of builds up from everything that we've seen in the series and understand that the series is about. Essentially, in the ending, the whole family is at a diner and they're having dinner. We see a car pull up, we see a bunch of people get out, and we don't know what's going to happen, right? Because this is a mob family that has lived under the gun for a long time. And the whole idea of the series is you don't know when death is going to come because that's the life of a mobster. One day you could wake up and someone can just shoot you in the head, boom, show over. What happens after that is David Chase decides, cut to black, and just play Journeys Don't Stop Believing.
Yeah.
It leaves things ambiguous. It doesn't show you how it ends. And the reason I like that is because I think Tony overcomes it. I think whatever the case is, his adventures continue. Other people have different reads of it, and I think that's what made that ending work for me because I love that show so much. I don't think I would have been happy with another kind of ending. I wouldn't have been happy if you showed someone whack Tony, and I wouldn't have been happy with a happily ever after either because I know that's not real. That's not what the show is. That would be a lie, and that would be just fan wank and fan service. So by ending it in this way, I thought, oh, that's good, that's smart.
I feel like by ending it that way, you can bring to it what you want it to be. That is the most daring thing a writer can do, is that to say, this ending is for you, the audience member. You decide how you want the Sopranos to have their cake, right? Like what happens now is your call. And I like that. I like that after such a fantastic show where they've taken us places, that those writers can say, this last one's for you.
It is the least wankery ending.
Yes, I agree.
In that the writer hasn't gone or the creator hasn't gone, these are my characters, I will do with them as I please, right? I'm giving them to you, the audience. You figure it out, which is very cool.
Yeah. At Virtuous asks, who do you think are the best up-and-coming talents in Malaysia, acting and or directing?
Also very difficult. I say very difficult because you go back to like body of work and what you've actually seen these people in. The first names that kind of come to mind are, I think we enjoyed Mia Sarashauki
I was going to say,
in
yeah.
that alien invasion show for Kuman Pictures. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought she was very good in that. I think she's in Gang Kubo next, so I'm waiting to see what she's like in that one.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, he's not Malaysian, but the director of La Luna, M. Raihan Halim, I'm waiting to see what he does next because I love that movie.
I was going to say Hairul Anwar, the director who did Tiga Janda.
Yes, for sure.
I thought I really liked that film, and I think that was his first. So
It was his first. I think he had only done TV commercials before that.
yeah, so I'm curious to see where he goes from there.
A little known actor called Bron Palare.
I hear he's not bad. I've seen some of his stuff.
Some of his stuff.
I've seen some of his stuff. Okay. Got promise.
I know he is looking to make his directorial debut.
Mm.
And I'm curious to see what he's like as a director. Only because in the conversations we've had with him in the past, he's one of the rare Malaysian actors who feels like a studied individual. He studies his craft and he talks about his craft in a serious way. And so I would like to see what he brings to the table with regards to directing.
I will say this isn't really an up and coming, but like I'm always curious to see what Shahizi Sam does.
Agreed.
Only because he felt for a long time someone who was very one note. And then I saw him in La Luna and realized that actually this guy can act.
Actually, he's very good.
Yeah, but also in Police Evil 3, right? He wasn't just the action guy. He had range, he had pathos, he had dynamism as an actor. And I feel like La Luna showed more sides that we had not seen of him. And I feel like I'm always curious about what he's going to do next.
Cho Wee-jun, who did Hungry Ghost Diner, he's a friend of ours. It's his debut feature, and we know him very, very well. And it's always nice that when someone you know produces good work and you don't have to hide from them
Yeah.
after you've seen their movie. But I'm curious to see what his next film is going to be.
The other one I want to bring up was the girl from La Luna, the little girl from La Luna. I think we both saw La Luna. We both really liked it. I thought her performance was fantastic. I saw her in Mentega Terbang. I thought she was good. And the jump from Mentega Terbang to La Luna was a big one because her role was a lot more fleshed out. She played a more pivotal role. Her character was more developed in La Luna, and I really liked that jump that she made as an actor. So I want to see what else she does.
Sorry if we couldn't get to all of your questions. There are more questions. We've added them to the list. Some of you have asked for listicles, and what we're going to do is we're going to endeavor to make those listicles into social media postings for you. So instead of you listening to us go on and on about 10, 9, 8, 7, 6 in a top 10 list, we thought we'd make it into an easily digestible form for you. So look out for that on our social media feeds. I got a question for you, Bahir. How am I sounding? Am I sounding sexier than usual? It's because I've got a brand new microphone.
Oh my.
Oh, yeah. I know. I'm very impressed with this microphone. We've been doing this for 4 years, and I decided we need an upgrade. So this is the Shure SM7DB coming at you live.
Oh, it sounds good.
All right. You know what to do. Keep your questions coming in. Reach out on all of our social media feeds, Goggler MY. You can also email us on podcast@goggler.my or send us a WhatsApp on the Goggler hotline, 012-524-5208. Thank you so much for listening. This is the Goggler Podcast.